So, Cave Story, right? While far from the first of its kind, it was still one of the initial games that really pushed indie titles into the mainstream, showing many soon-to-be developers that, yes, even you can make a game, beyond the confines of simple browser experiences. To this day, you can still feel its impact from Undertale to Undertale to Undertale, not even touching upon the game's own popularity, leading to ports for just about any system you can think of, officially sanctioned or otherwise. I could play Cave Story right now on everything from my PC to my DSi, my Sega Genesis, and even my Analog Pocket for the aforementioned Genesis version. And, of course, it's kind of an all-time classic. Not as much an atom bomb of cultural ubiquity like that of Sans Undertale, but you're definitely gonna see a curly brace PFP on the internet at some point. But despite how widely accessible Cave Story is, I've never fully played through it. Every couple of years I'd play through the first hour or so, and just drop it there. I don't know what's wrong with me. I'm not here to give a moment-by-moment breakdown of how freaking good this game is, because you've heard this game's praises sung 1,000 times over the past 20 plus years. So instead, here's, well, hopefully something a little more interesting than that. A thing that really stuck out to me on this go-around is simply how tightly designed Cave Story is. It's a dense game with a lot to say, not just through words, but among other things, action as well, and it happens to be really damn effective at communicating. Ow. Well, besides that one time I got lost after escaping Labyrinth, but I think I'll chalk that up more as a personal failing rather than a fault of the game. It's little things like a gap in the wall you can pass through, saving a bit of time after obtaining the map system, or reactivating the power to Grass Town, allowing quick access to a nearby save point right after a boss fight. For the most part, Cave Story knows how to space stuff out so it doesn't get too tiring or repetitive. Unless you're me quintupling back through Grass Town, but that's besides the point. There's a nice balance struck between a linear structure and more open-ended design. It's got some of that Metroid DNA in it, like hidden items and health upgrades. Even the aptly named First Cave is set up similarly to the original Metroid's opening area, though most of the game's areas are accessed via a teleporter in Mimiga Village, serving as the main hub rather than one big overarching map. It's great how typical playthroughs bookend on Last Cave, which not only puts all your abilities to test, it also serves as a tutorial for the absurdly difficult area found in the true ending route. Oh, so about that. Another example of that open-endedness is how the story can branch off in slightly different directions depending on your actions. While the first third or so of the game always plays out the same, that quickly changes by the time you reach the Sand Zone. I already knew going in that I shouldn't trade my Polar Star for a machine gun, since there'd be a better upgrade for it later down the line, but I didn't know when that opportunity would come, so when I was later given the choice to fuse it and my pretty situational fireball into a single, stronger weapon, I went through with that. And turns out, maybe that wasn't a wise decision either, since you can directly upgrade the Polar Star from the guy you sorta stole it from a little later. I was still able to get through the rest of the game fine, but that kind of risk from not knowing your first time can be really engaging. Plus, it adds some delectable replay value. Sometimes, the best choice isn't always obvious, perhaps most infamously in that one room. The only indication you aren't supposed to go down to Professor Booster is the presence of a save point. Making that jump is legitimately tough, and it's required if you want to get the true ending, and that's not an isolated instance either. Obviously, you can just pull out a guide in that case, to avoid figuring out each esoteric step on your own, and perhaps I may have done that for my second playthrough to an extent, but shh, don't tell anyone. All this flexibility and choice is honestly crazy, as trivial as some of it might seem on the surface, Every little way a playthrough can deviate from one another needs to be accounted for, which can exponentially increase a game's scope, especially if you're the sole dev of a project like Pixel was with this game. And in spite of its small scale in the grand scheme of things, it still took 5 years for this game to be made, one that took me a little under 7 hours to beat on my first try. Games are tough to make, so it's really wonderful to get the opportunity to play one of this caliber, where everything down to the exact feel of the controls is right on point, with a cast of unforgettable characters and a story that's genuinely kinda poignant. It is precisely that charming. Now, with that prefaced, let me ask something. Why do we still love this game, beyond what I've already said about it? We, as in advanced level gamers, if you personally don't care or dislike this game, you can... well, you're not part of this. For a good while, Cave Story remained a free game you could download on your computer to, say, have fun with. But once the 2010s came around, that all changed. An absolute onslaught of new ports would hit consoles and handhelds alike, with new features and a price tag to boot. Hell, even PCs would get their own slice of the new age Cave Story pie, that of course being Cave Story Plus, new soundtrack and visual options, all the extra modes from the WiiWare release, and a whole new level. Oh, and did I mention, these ports were also the first time the game received an official English language release. Although, as you might expect, it's a different script from the one done by the Aeon Genesis group back in the 2000s, which might be a point of contention for some. Obviously, you can still download the original free version if you prefer. It's what I played for this very video. But regardless of that and certain other controversies which I don't intend on getting into, I don't think these enhanced re-releases would have come about if it weren't for people's initial reverence for Cave Story, the thing created and released independently by Daisuke Amaya, aka Pixel, the fan translations, tribute web pages, and so on. Speaking of, Aeon Genesis was far more prolific in the fan translation game than just the Cave Story one, including the likes of Clock Tower, Puyo Puyo for the Famicom, Front Mission Gun Hazard, and even Shin Megami Tensei 1 and 2, the former of which predating the first mainline release in America by over 2 years. It's hard to truly understate how much good a fan translation can do, especially when there's a perpetual lack of official options, as fans of the Mother series can attest to. Whether it be something deemed too niche for a Western audience, issues regarding licensing, a general lack of funding, or just being a real piece of shit. Sometimes even Kusoge deserves to be played and understood, on a linguistic level anyways. Beyond translating the untranslated, games like Amnesia might not exist without Resident Evil, you wouldn't have Breath of the Wild without Ocarina of Time, etc. And it's easy to look back upon these games once heralded as masterpieces as just average, or worse, having outright aged poorly. But the thing about games aging is that, well, it's an inherently retrospective view. They were the ones that revolutionized their respective genres, and paved the way for far more games to come. They didn't become worse, nor was time passing just the cause for re-examination. More accurately, the conventions set were iterated upon and optimized, with new conventions compounding those from prior, sometimes to help sand off the rough edges. So yes, OOT is still the GOAT, even if it doesn't exactly conform to the modern conventions it had a part in establishing. And in a way, Cave Story is kinda the golden child among all that. It's older now than its inspirations were, yet it got things right. It managed to hold up, becoming a figurative greatest hits compilation, and more. That isn't to say it's not deserving of praise, but that part of the way it is from retreading that ground. But the main way it differs from its inspirations is not just its level of polish, or its focus on character, or even its bangin' tunes. Rather, well, that it was made by one guy. It is a single individual's vision through and through, so maybe all of the above. You can feel it seep into every little facet of Cave Story in one way or another. There's just a particular set of mannerisms specific to this game not felt in ones made by full teams / companies, let alone by the time the game came out. Shit, I wasn't even out when this game came out. I was a post-Cave Story event. To be clear, I don't really know what Daisuke Amaya has said or done outside of this game. I'm going into this without that external context, which is the context a lot of people end up playing under. Though shoutouts to Keto Blaster, by the way, that game's also pretty great. And even then, Cave Story still expresses so much of his vision through itself alone. That's the main spark of an independent work, the thing that really hooks people in after they take that first step. Because once you do, well, it's hard to turn back. And nowhere else is that individual spirit reflected clearer than all the way back in First Cave, in the very room where you got your first weapon from. After the person inside finishes the prototype you took from them, if you decide to interact with them again, they have this to say. Verbatim, "In this world, there exists a balance between those who are creators and those who are users. I knew that, of course, but it took your help for me to experience this firsthand. From now on, I vow to dedicate myself to the side of creation. The labor involved becomes joy when I know there are those who will enjoy my work to the utmost." Like I said before, Cave Story is literally older now than its inspirations were when it came out. So by that metric, you could say it's retro now. The retro throwback game is retro. But who's to say that's a diminishing factor, or even a delineating factor at all? Compared to other mediums, video games are still a fledgling art form experiencing rapid change and growth, which makes one that's 20 years old feel like an eternity ago. To give a frame of reference, a handful of the people that made some of the very first video games, like Space War, are still alive. And some of those behind the most influential gaming series continue to work in this industry to this very day. That's kind of fucking nuts, isn't it? As the years go on, it's become easier and easier for independent games to be developed, with barriers to entry like having to code your own engine no longer being necessary. If you have $100 and enough fortitude, you can get a game on the biggest digital PC storefront, Steam, or even on a platform like itch.io with no charge if you prefer. Of course, that lowered bar to entry also means a lot of garbage, but that shouldn't take away from the immense amount of good that comes with it. And I mean a lot. There are literally thousands of free and cheap indie games at your fingertips right now, all pleading to have their voice heard. So, where can an old game like Cave Story fit into the rapidly accelerating rate of the modern day? Why is it still worth playing? Well, okay, so obviously you can't play every new indie release, let alone every game, nor are you under an authoritative obligation to play the video game the YouTube person wants you to. So, take this more as a suggestion, a recommendation, if you will. Deciding to look into some random game on a whim, whether it be an all-time classic or a game I've heard nothing about prior, has genuinely led to some of the most enthralling gaming experiences I've had. I wouldn't have fallen in love with the Dragon Quest franchise had I not legally purchased the Game Boy remake of the first two entries. If I didn't hear word of it online right after launch, I might have never discovered the bizarre Mad Rat Dead, a great rhythm game and one of my favorite games. And Balan 1 that goes beyond purely recreational stuff I've been up to on my own time. It's also been a key factor behind videos on this very channel, like playing some old quirky action game for the Game Boy since it seemed interesting, or purchasing a remaster collection because it was on sale. It doesn't have to be a life-changing experience. It can just be something you come across and have fun with for a bit, see if you vibe with it and all that, and if not, then whatever. And with Cave Story, assuming you have a PC, it's available now for free and has been for years. The only risk involved is temporal in nature. And while the passage of time might be vicious and inevitable for people, it's a different story for the media we consume, to an extent anyways. Cave Story is a very special game I'm glad to have finally played through, and into the new year. Even if I ended up putting off beating the true final boss so I could finish this script. Yes, I'm aware of the irony to that. And overall, like I said at the start, it's just a good-ass game. One more thing. This isn't a retrospective on what made this game great. That's kind of dishonest. Cave Story isn't an old game from years past. No, it's a game for the present. Because we're still playing it.